When two nations, known for their long-standing friendship, suddenly find themselves at the heart of a diplomatic storm. Hardeep Singh Nijjar is the name because of whom Indian-Canadian relations are at their lowest level today. Dive with us into the unfolding saga of India and Canada as we unravel the truth behind the headlines. How did this current diplomatic row between India and Canada started? On September 18th, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau made an announcement regarding the discovery of substantial evidence by Canadian security agencies. This evidence pointed to the involvement of the Indian government in the murder of Hardeep Singh Nijjar, a Canadian citizen of Indian origin, which occurred in British Columbia earlier this year. Within this compilation, experts from the Canada Institute provide their insights and analysis on the resulting diplomatic repercussions and how they may impact both nations, their bilateral relations, and the broader dynamics in the Indo-Pacific region. Before we talk about India and Canada, we must first talk about Hardeep Singh Nijjar. Because of him today, India and Canada relations are at their lowest point. Hardeep Singh Nijjar was born in Jalandhar, Punjab. He moved to Canada in 1997. He worked as a plumber in Canada and got settled in Surrey, British Columbia. He was a big supporter of Khalistan. According to the central government of India, he is involved in terrorism. He was chief of the Khalistan Tiger Force, and India has already listed it as a terror outfit and has said it has connections with Pakistani ISI. The Indian government also announced Nijjar as a terrorist in 2020. The demand for Khalistan, a separate Sikh state, stems from historical and political factors. In the 1980s, the demand for Khalistan gained prominence in India, leading to an armed insurgency that resulted in thousands of casualties before it was suppressed. Today, this movement is not as prevalent in Punjab and is opposed by mainstream Indian political parties. However, among some members of the Sikh diaspora in countries like Canada, Australia, and the UK, calls for Khalistan persist. These demonstrations and referendums related to Khalistan, while not illegal in these countries, remain a significant point of contention between these nations and India. During a tense encounter at the G20 summit in New Delhi, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau found himself amid a diplomatic tangle with his Indian counterpart, Narendra Modi. Modi expressed concerns over Sikh Khalistani protests in Canada, seeing them as a threat to India's sovereignty. Trudeau, with Canada hosting the largest Sikh diaspora outside Punjab, defended these protests as exercises of freedom. In an unexpected twist, Trudeau also privately shared his suspicions about India's involvement in the murder of Hardeep Singh Nijjar, with world leaders like Joe Biden, Rishi Sunak, and Emmanuel Macron, adding a layer of intrigue to the diplomatic proceedings. After Canada's Prime Minister publicly implicating India in the murder of a Canadian Sikh activist within Canada has ignited a crisis. India denies involvement, imposing measures like visa restrictions and diplomatic expulsions. Trade negotiations are halted, and further repercussions are anticipated. These events reveal that India's Prime Minister Modi isn't afraid to get involved in other countries' matters if he thinks it protects India's interests. It also shows that India might not always follow the global rules that Canada believes in. Furthermore, Canada's big overseas communities make it open to interference from foreign governments, making it a potential target. Moreover, Canada finds itself somewhat isolated without strong backing from its usual allies. Western nations are banking on strengthening their economic and security ties with India as a way to balance against China and are reluctant to jeopardize those efforts. The Western response to the ongoing dispute has been notably measured, as they view India as a valuable counterbalance to China. The Five Eyes Alliance, comprising the US, UK, Australia, Canada, and New Zealand, has not firmly backed Canada, and public statements from the US have been somewhat reserved. The United States is positioning itself as a potential mediator in the conflict between Ottawa and Delhi. According to experts quoted by the BBC, Canada's interest in this matter are currently overshadowed by India's significant strategic significance. It is improbable that Canada's allies, including the US, the UK, and France, will sever ties with India solely due to Prime Minister Trudeau's allegations. What will be the impact if the standoff worsens? First, trade. Trade represents the most conspicuous facet of the economic ties between Canada and India, drawing significant attention due to ongoing bilateral agreement negotiations. These discussions, initiated in 2010 with aspirations beyond trade, have faltered due to the countries' limited economic importance to each other. India ranks around 10th among Canada's trade partners, while Canada hovers at approximately 30th on India's list. The trade relationship primarily involves agricultural products, minerals, light manufactures, textiles, and gems, contributing to less than 1% of their total international trade. Unfortunately, these negotiations, characterized by a protracted history, have now stalled indefinitely. Canadian investment in India, primarily driven by pension funds diversifying beyond the US, UK, and EU, had been on the rise. These funds were eyeing opportunities in Indian infrastructure, health, and green technology sectors. India valued this patient capital for its technical expertise. Conversely, India sought secure mineral sources, making Canada an appealing investment partner. However, if the crisis escalates, India could impose stricter regulations on Canadian investments as part of retaliatory measures. Higher education has seen substantial growth, particularly in the influx of Indian students at Canadian colleges and universities. Over the past decade, international student enrollment has surged by over 150%, with India contributing significantly, sending 226,000 students in 2022, the largest group from any sender country. Some Canadian institutions heavily rely on foreign student fees, especially in Ontario. However, the Indian government may redirect scholarship recipients to countries like Australia, the UK, and the US, which already host substantial Indian student populations. List of diplomatic and trade actions taken by the two nations so far. On September 1st, Canada unexpectedly halted discussions on a proposed trade agreement with India, as confirmed by a Canadian official. This decision came approximately 3 months after both nations had expressed their intention to finalize an initial pact within the year. During a meeting on September 10th, on the sidelines of a G20 summit in New Delhi, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi raised serious concerns with Prime Minister Justin Trudeau regarding Sikh separatist protests taking place in Canada. September 15th, Canada postponed a trade mission to India planned for October, led by Trade Minister Mary Ung, a spokesperson for the minister. Canada's decision to halt trade treaty talks and postpone the mission was due to concerns surrounding the murder, a Canadian source told Reuters. Trudeau told Parliament on September 18 that Canada was actively pursuing credible allegations linking Indian government agents to the killing of Nijjar, a Canadian citizen campaigning for the creation of an independent Sikh homeland carved out of India. On September 19th, India strongly rejected Prime Minister Trudeau's statement as absurd. In response, both countries engaged in a diplomatic tit-for-tat, with Canada expelling India's top intelligence officer from the country and India reciprocating by expelling the Canadian counterpart. On September 20th, India issued a statement urging its citizens residing in Canada to exercise caution. This advisory came as the United States, Australia, and Britain also expressed their concerns regarding the escalating situation. Adding to the tension, India's JSW Steel Ltd, as reported on September 21st, has decided to slow down its efforts to acquire a stake in the steelmaking coal unit of Canada's Teck Resources. This development was cited from a source closely involved in the discussions. On September 22nd, India took further steps in response to the escalating tension with Canada. India suspended the issuance of new visas for Canadian citizens and also called on Ottawa to reduce its diplomatic presence in India. Despite these diplomatic measures, there were some assurances regarding key economic interests. On the same day, fertilizer importer Indian Potash stated that it did not anticipate any disruptions in the supply of Canadian potash and expressed hopes of extending its contract with Canadian supplier Campotex beyond the end of September. Canada plays a vital role as one of India's primary suppliers of potash. However, the strained relations did have an impact on trade. According to industry sources in both nations, sales of Canadian lentils to India slowed down as tensions continued to rise. Canada had been a major source of lentil imports for India, and lentils are a significant source of protein in the Indian diet. Despite these trade fluctuations, India's Steel Secretary offered reassurance on September 28, stating that Indian exports to Canada were relatively small and had not been significantly affected by the ongoing diplomatic dispute. October 3rd, India has asked Canada to withdraw about 40 diplomatic staff from India, reports say, in a sharp escalation of a weeks-long crisis. One could argue that the factors leading to the diplomatic dispute with Canada represent just one facet of the approaching Indian century.